It's all about having the key insights, following the leaders of the crypto industry and background stories on blockchain technology trends to keep you one step ahead. Monty Metzger, CEO of LCX.com, keeps you up to speed with what's moving global crypto markets and gives you the latest insights about LCX's platform and ecosystem. This is LCX Insights Live.
Welcome to this special LCX Insights Live. In our live video shows, I'm engaging with the world's top blockchain project, with entrepreneurs, with investors and pioneers in crypto and digital, in honest conversations meant to challenge traditional ways of thinking. My name is Monty Metzger and I'm founder and CEO at LCX. LCX is a regulated fintech company that focuses on digital asset trading, compliant token offerings, and tokenization. LCX has received 8 blockchain-related approvals by the Liechtenstein regulator, more than any other company in the country. And as you know, Liechtenstein is a country next to Switzerland and Austria in the heart of Europe. And the country has received a AAA rating from Standard & Poor's. That's the highest rating possible as a country. But even more important, Liechtenstein has introduced the most forward-thinking legal framework for cryptocurrencies and blockchain companies, providing legal clarity and security for our LCX users. Today's show title is From the Internet of Information to the Internet of Value. And today's guest is one of the most sought after visionaries in business and technologies. Wikipedia is one of the 5th most popular website in the world, moving towards the goal of free access for all the sum of human knowledge. He is also the founder of WikiTribune Social, which is a groundbreaking, collaborative, editable social networking platform that will change the way we digest news. He had been named thoughtful, visionary, inspiring, and absolutely wonderful. I know him since a very long time, and he had been named also by Times Magazine as one of the 100 most influential people on the planet. He is contributing to the World Economic Forum and is a frequent speaker and thought leader. He is most famous for being known as the founder of Wikipedia, and he's an advisor at LCX. So I'm very proud to welcome here at LCX Insights Live, Mr. Jimmy Wales. Where are you?
Hello. How are you?
Welcome.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. It's as you can see, I apologize to everyone for my hot appearance, but I'm in London, and it's very hot today in London. So.
Welcome. Yeah, thanks for bringing this hot energy here in the show. And I think here summertime is important for London that you get some sun and it's not raining all the time. But now let's dive right into a couple of topics. And I think the audience is excited to learn about your journey, your experience, and now what are your thoughts on the current digital industry and the blockchain industry. Let's begin with Wikipedia. Could you describe what is Wikipedia from your perspective right now, and how big is it at the moment in terms of community and visitors?
Yeah, so, well, you know, Wikipedia is, as you say, it's one of the 5 most visited websites in the world. We have hundreds of millions of visitors every month. We see something like 1.5 billion devices every month, which of course doesn't mean 1.5 billion people, because obviously people, you know, you and I probably both visit Wikipedia on our phone and on our laptop and so forth. But it's huge, and it's a really, really big community, and very stable and mature community. And I think a part of what has been really interesting about Wikipedia throughout the entire era is that we've always had this core value of neutrality in the community, which has been a really fantastic technique to allow people who have different perspectives to work together in a thoughtful way. So the idea is, let's look for the highest quality sources, Let's be fair to all viewpoints. Let's try to explain topics rather than polemicize or argue about them. And that's worked reasonably well. Obviously, it's a loud and noisy community and all of that. But it's been an incredible journey. And of course, we started from nothing. I mean, it's a very classic sort of entrepreneurial startup story. I mean, I remember typing the first words, making the first edit of Wikipedia, and in the olden days, I used to personally go and install servers in the racks back when you did that at the data center. And now we've become part of the infrastructure of the world. So that's been an amazing journey. And it's what I always say about all these things is, there's a sort of a myth of entrepreneurship, which a story like Wikipedia might lead you down that path, which is, you have one brilliant idea and it goes straight to the moon and so on and so forth. Usually it ends with, and then you become the richest person in the world and you fly to space. But in my case, obviously we're a charity, so that part, the last part, didn't happen. But it is a myth. And, I always say my path and my journey as an entrepreneur is much more typical of what a lot of young entrepreneurs need to get their heads around. I mean, the stories of the Mark Zuckerbergs, or the Google guys or whatever, where they start with one fantastic idea and it just goes to the moon. That's really quite rare. That's not the normal path, even for a lot of really successful entrepreneurs. And this is where, sort of getting comfortable with ideas of failure, getting comfortable with what it means to innovate, which means you're trying things that don't always work out. And you have to pivot and you have to, rethink and sort of come to new ideas as you learn along the path. That's really what entrepreneurship is all about. And I think that's important because a lot of people who could be great entrepreneurs can be a little bit intimidated by that process, right? Or they start out and they try something and it doesn't work and they become completely disheartened. And instead to say, oh no, actually, if I tried something and it didn't work out, I'm still in a much better position than the person who never tried anything at all, because I've learned, I've become more, sort of skilled and hardened, and I now am in a better position to move on to the next thing. So, yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I think what makes Wikipedia so special is the community, and we're excited and honored to have you as an advisor at LCX. And I think the key value you bring in is really, I always call you the community whisperer, because Wikipedia has 5.6 billion monthly visitors at the moment from recent numbers, and has like 42 million. Oh, sorry?
Yeah, that sounds too high to me. But anyway, it doesn't matter. It's a lot.
It's a lot, yeah. And it has 42 million registered users, according to latest data. So now with like more than 40 million users on the platform, and then there's a percentage who are like really active, probably on a daily basis.
Yeah.
What are kind of your magic rules to get to a large community, how to build a community like that, and what makes the Wikipedia community so special?
So, I mean, one of the things that I always like to talk about is how the word community is often overused or used incorrectly when we talk about the internet. I mean, a lot of people use the word community when they should just be saying the general public. For me, a community is always a group of people who it's not that everybody knows everybody, but they know each other. It's like if you live in a town of 80,000 people, that's a community. You don't know all 80,000 people, but you know a lot of people, they know other people, and so on. And for us, we've never really, one of the reasons Wikipedia has been successful is we've always said this isn't a social, wide open social network platform where you come and say whatever you like. This is a project to build an encyclopedia. And so we have a lot of rules. We have a lot of, very long-standing processes and procedures and debates and dialogues and things like this. So, one of the things that we don't look at, for example, we could radically increase the number of people who are editing Wikipedia. but we don't want to, right? We do want to radically increase the number of thoughtful, kind people who have the Wikipedia spirit, but just increasing the number of people just for the sake of it has never been a goal. It's really all about how do we make Wikipedia as good as it possibly can be. And so that means, unlike, in this era, we've seen this enormous kind of backlash, and there's a lot of deep concerns about the unhealthiness of social media, the trolling, the abuse, and so on and so forth. At Wikipedia, we've never tolerated any of that stuff. We block people, and when I say we, I don't mean the Wikimedia Foundation, which is the charity that owns and operates Wikipedia. I mean we, the community, block people a lot, because we have rules like no personal attacks, right? Can you imagine? I don't know what Twitter would be like if it had a rule against personal attacks, since 99% of what's on Twitter is people attacking each other. But we've always said, no, like, if you want to attack people, there's plenty of places to attack people all over the internet. It's not welcome in Wikipedia. Wikipedia, what we're here to do is improve the encyclopedia. And so, ironically, rules that are in many ways exclusionary for certain behaviors are actually inclusive in terms of bringing more people in, a more diverse audience. We do struggle. We want to be even more diverse than we are. That's a whole other conversation. But in general, the core to what has made the Wikipedia community great is a set of ethical concepts, ethical guidelines to say, look, you're not here to engage in battleground mentality. You're here to work collaboratively with others to try to improve the situation. That doesn't mean everybody agrees all the time, of course, but it means, and it also doesn't mean there are never any personal attacks in Wikipedia. I mean, we're human beings, so it's a bit messy. But the idea is like, okay, if you come in and you call somebody, a Nazi, right? That's not really what you should be doing at Wikipedia. And, basically, you should apologize, right? And you should say, actually, look, I really strongly disagree with what you said. And, if somebody else is attacking you, then you don't attack back. You basically go, hey, you're going to get blocked if you keep misbehaving. Like we have rules here. Like this isn't anarchy. So that's worked really, really well for us and has allowed the community to thrive and grow over the years.
Yes, I think these are incredible important points. This autonomous organization in a way, self-controlling the content and the information you're putting out. And now I think it's also about reputation, because everybody's quoting Wikipedia. So the importance, like at the beginning, probably it was not that relevant, but now it is super relevant. Like if you change a piece of history suddenly, incredible. So in the decentralized finance, the DeFi world and the blockchain world, a lot of organizations are started now as a DAO, decentralized autonomous organization, DAO, and to like self-organize themselves to create this blockchain which is fully decentralized. But actually, when I look at Wikipedia, it is like a DAO. In a way, because it's self-organizing in so many ways. So can you tell me, like, how did that start? Like, how did you get people working and or spending time for free and putting in the power there in terms of time, engagement, passion, everything they put into Wikipedia?
Yeah, so I think a big piece of what is important about Wikipedia, if we want to think about the motivations that people have, like why are people really pouring their hearts into the project, and it really is, it's two things. One, if you spend an afternoon improving some obscure topic in Wikipedia and making it better, then you can go to bed that night thinking, okay, the world is a little bit better than it was. Like before, when I woke up this morning, there wasn't a great article on this person, and now there is. I've improved the world. And then two, it's just fun. Like you meet other people who are interested in the same topics you're in. They help you, you collaborate, and working together, you can create something much better than you could create on your own, because different people have different background, different knowledge, and they can just help you. They can help each other and share in the effort. And so that idea that it's fun and that it's productive in the real sense of the world is better, like you've constructed something better in the world, that's a huge motivation to people. And if you think about, people do things that are fun but not productive. So you could spend your Saturday playing Grand Theft Auto, probably fun, but when you go to bed that night, you don't think, well, the world's a better place now because I don't know, stole 3 cars or whatever you do in Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah.
You just think, oh, I played a game and probably a waste of time. And so those are the elements. And I think one of the things that comes up fairly often when people come to Wikipedia from a sort of DAO or blockchain perspective is that world can often have a very narrow understanding of human motivation and interests. So people immediately go to concepts about how could people get paid for editing Wikipedia? How could people could bid, and whoever pays the highest price wins what Wikipedia says. But we really reject all of those ideas. Like those are not helpful, because for Wikipedia, well, you can imagine, imagine an entry about some big but boring company. Let's imagine Exxon and the article about the Exxon Valdez oil spill.
Yeah.
Okay, let's not have that entry about that piece of history go to the highest bidder, right? That shouldn't be paid for by Exxon PR people. Like, that's really anathema to the idea of knowledge. And so a lot of the ideas that people come up with in this area just really don't work. Another element of that is, people say to me, oh, wow, like venture capitalists must really love. So, another project of mine is now Fandom. So Fandom is, it's like over 100,000 wiki communities, an enormously popular website, 350 million unique visitors every month, something like that. It's huge. And somebody said to me, oh, the venture capitalists must love it that people come and they write all this wiki content for free. And I'm like, yeah, no, actually, what's funny is venture capitalists are the only people who've ever said, oh, what if you paid people like $1 every time they wrote a page? Wouldn't that? And so here's what I say. I'm like, okay, here's your topic. Game of Thrones, very popular TV show. It has huge fans who are massively into it. Who's going to write a better article? The person you paid $1, or the person who did it because they love the show and they love the mythology of the show and they want to meet other people who are into what they're into and they want to discuss it and debate it and they want to make the best possible article? That's who's going to write your great article. So you can, in order to get good content, good work out of people, you can either give them a great place in a community and make it fun, or you can just pay them a proper journalist salary, right? Pay them plenty of money and they'll do a good job. But the idea that you could pay people like micropayments to get them, to incentivize them to behave well, hasn't really worked. And that's not because micropayments haven't existed. It's because the incentive structure doesn't really work that way. And so this is where, people come to Wikipedia and they're thinking about, oh, now we've got this technology that can empower this kind of a marketplace, but not everything should be in a marketplace, right? I don't want to bid against my brother for what we're going to eat for Christmas dinner. It doesn't make any sense, and so it's I call it the classic kind of, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail issue. Yeah.
But I think you're tackling here like human motivation, and in previous talks we had, you also told me about all your experience in multiplayer online games and games in general, online gaming, and your passion behind it. When I look at Wikipedia, I also see some gamification models. Like there's a reputation of editors. There's a motivation why they should contribute. What are the key elements there in terms of, like, did you intentionally put these things in, or was it in your consciousness or something that you put these elements in the system?
I mean, to an extent, we have very consciously pushed very hard not to have gamification, and to avoid that whole world and the whole concept. What What we do have, yes, reputation, but it's not like a gamified reputation. So in Wikipedia, you don't end up with a score, like, oh, I've got 1,300 points because I'm a great Wikipedian. It's like you have a reputation the same way you have a good reputation with your friends or with your work colleagues or maybe more broadly. So within Wikipedia, there are people who are very well known as being great Wikipedians. So why are they great Wikipedians? Well, they write well. They are neutral. They look at quality sources. They're also the great Wikipedians are the ones who can come into a complicated situation and actually work with multiple people and reach a consensus and stop people from just like uselessly fighting, which isn't actually helpful at all. And so all of those things aren't scored. There's no algorithms. It's just like, oh wow, like we need New York Brad in here because New York Brad is really smart and really knows how to help us figure out the problem, and can be, and is a great Wikipedian who lots of people respect. And that's really important. And that's where I get to this idea of a community. And in fact, this is the way, if we think about other parallels, so open source software communities typically work the same way. Like there are people who are legendary even within certain projects, right? So, within a particular open source software project, you'll have people who maybe aren't famous sort of throughout the whole open source world, but in that project, people will go like, oh, yeah, this person basically, when we were facing a huge challenge in the code, this person figured it out, rewrote that whole problematic section of the code, and now everything is fantastic. And that's meaningful to people, and that's human and meaningful, right? It's very personal. And people do care about that sort of thing, not because they get a score or a badge, but they care about that because the people who respect them are people that they themselves respect. So I don't care about, if I'm a coder, I don't care about the respect of randos on the internet, right? But if I think, oh, this is a great team of great coders, and I've done great work and they think my work is good, hey, that's validating. That's meaningful because I'm getting feedback from people who I respect. That's amazing. And so this is where a lot of ideas around. So where gamification can work and can be useful, right, is when you don't have community. If you don't have a real community, then, so for example, if I'm on eBay and I'm thinking of buying something and I click and I look and I say, oh, wow, this person has 1,000 transactions and a 99% rating. I think, okay, great. Like, this is great. And it's not because there's a community. It's because they've gamified it and they've got some metrics. And in that case, it works very well, which means, by the way, in a lot of the more transactional blockchain kind of concepts, there is room for that kind of thing, right? Because you can say, actually, the point here is not like a small group where reputation really matters in the sense of, I want, Alice to respect me because I think Alice is very good at this. And if Alice respects me, that means validating because I respect Alice. It's more like, oh, okay, like I'm gonna sell this person something and I have no idea who they are, but the system says, like a lot of people have given them a thumbs up. So, okay, that's very good.
And actually, I also wanted to point out, so it's a live chat here, so people can put in their question on YouTube, and then I can pick some of them. So we already getting some applause here from Harish Mehra, for example, and then also some acknowledgement here from Street Known. Hey, Jimmy, you made my 4-year-old a living book. He knows everything taxonomy better than my college professor all the way of Wikipedia. So thanking you on behalf of Benjamin. That's his son, I assume. If
Benjamin spots any errors, then Benjamin should make an edit.
And I have so many friends.
Young, but
yeah, I have so many friends who just like love to read Wikipedia all the time and learn and educate themselves. But a key question, like when did you start? When was the kind of first year or months, or when did you go online?
2001, so 20 years ago.
Okay,
yeah.
Which day or months do you remember?
January 15th.
Okay, so you had the big celebration now this January then.
Yeah. We did. I mean, it's unfortunate. So 10 years ago here in London, I had a big party.
Yeah.
Invited people. We had a Wikipedia Globe, and we had a string quartet, and Richard Dawkins spoke, and so on. Like it was a great celebration. So I'd been looking forward for a few years, thinking, oh yeah, in our 20th anniversary party, I'll do this again, and it'll be even bigger. But of course, 20th anniversary, we had a virtual event, so that was okay. But it did kind of put a lot of the in-person stuff, to the side.
That's right. Yeah. So I think here different times, but also a lot of benefits. So at least we can connect here on the show. But I wanted to pick another question here from Ike, one of our strong community members. He's asking, what strategy did you follow to become so big? Was there a key event?
So yes and no. So it's interesting. So one of the things that I would say from very early on, we as a community, we thought of ourselves as some geeks writing an encyclopedia, and we hoped it would be popular. We hoped it would be successful. We you're putting all this work into writing the encyclopedia. You want people to read it, but we didn't compare ourselves to any competition. There wasn't really competition, et cetera. And so, as we started to get popular, there were a few things. So one of the things that I think is interesting, there was a period of time when what I used to do, I used to go through the access logs. This is way before Google Analytics existed and all kinds of fancy tools. And I would just I would look at the referrer logs and see when people came from Google, what were they reading? And so then I wrote a little page which I updated from time to time called "What Google Likes," just to say, like, how is it we're getting traffic? What are people interested in? Because we had a lot of great Wikipedians who are like, oh, I'm interested in helping the project. I could write about anything. Oh, I see. Oh, actually, it looks like World War II topics are popular. I'm interested. I'm gonna write about a battle in World War II, and so they would go and start a little article, and we get some traffic. Or you see sports stars are popular, so people would go, okay, let's do that. So there was a lot of that sort of. People were interested in seeing our growth, and they would look at back then we looked at the Alexa rankings, which were not very accurate, and they're still not very accurate, but it's public, so people would look at that and be excited as we're moving up. And then in terms of events, like realistically, I mean, one of the things that happened is fairly early on was there was a bad error in Wikipedia. And we said of someone that he had been briefly suspected of having something to do with the Kennedy assassination. And that was terrible. Almost no one saw that page. He called me up. He was an older gentleman. He was not happy to read this. I got off the phone. We had it fixed within 10 minutes because Wikipedia is quite easy to fix. And I thought that was the end of it. But then he wrote a scathing editorial in USA Today newspaper. And it got a huge amount of press attention. And, he called us dangerous and so on. And then they had me on CNN to yell at me. But we got a huge amount of negative press coverage. And our traffic started tripling every month. Like it just shot through the roof because suddenly everybody was talking about us. And then, so I don't recommend this as a way forward. But the truth is that's just history. Like that's part of what happened was the people became aware of Wikipedia, but it being a new concept, this idea of very open system that people could participate in a new way. It just drove a lot of attention and therefore a lot of participation. Obviously, we can say the same thing about the early days of cryptocurrency and blockchain, which we're still in, which is it's controversial and there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of weird things that have happened. And that drives a lot of negative press. But of course, that just drives interest as well. So yeah, I don't recommend it, right? Negative press is not a good thing. So I'm not saying that. I'm not saying be controversial just to be successful. I don't think that really works. But if there is some controversy, don't curl up and die in the corner. If there's a real problem, solve it. Like you have that responsibility. If there's not a real problem, you can fight back and just kind of go, yeah, actually, at least people are noticing what we're doing. And so that's kind of part of that whole history.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's an exciting history. I think then bad PR, it can be good PR. That can be kind of the conclusion.
And of course, I mean, I think we have to say, like, the whole Satoshi Nakamoto mystery has been fantastic for Bitcoin in particular, but even more broadly, because what a great story, like what a great mystery. Like it's intellectually fascinating that this, clearly innovative thing has come out, and somebody has Bitcoins, or they're probably dead, or who knows, but worth 30 billion. And it's like, it's a kind of mind-boggling that such a thing could happen, and that this sort of industry has boomed and flourished around the work of someone who nobody knows who is. Like, that's just a wild story. If you wrote a movie about that, people would say this is ridiculous, like that's impossible, but anyway, it's kind of cool.
That's right. Yeah. So the mystery around Satoshi Nakamoto is really driving the tension, and it also works a little bit like a foundation, I would say, because if somebody would touch the funds, a lot of these things would be not as precious as they are at the moment. But we also once sat together at a very special one of these Davos moments. I remember it was one of these snowy chalets. I think there was Leonardo DiCaprio and Bono was in the room, and then you were standing next to Larry Page. Do you think Google contributed to the success, or what's the contribution of Google as a search engine to Wikipedia?
Well, I mean, there's clearly a symbiotic relationship. So for Google, their algorithm quite early on recognized Wikipedia as the answer to a lot of questions that people have. And what makes it symbiotic is, the types of searches where people come to Wikipedia are not very financially useful searches, right? So people come to Wikipedia because they type things like, I don't know, Queen Victoria, right? So if somebody just typed Queen Victoria into Google, there's pretty much nothing to sell them, like maybe a book or something, but basically they're just looking for information. If you type something like cheap Canon cameras, then half the page is ads, because you're clearly along the funnel shopping. And so for Google, if all they had was good results for cheap Canon camera, then people wouldn't come to them every single day. Instead, it's like whatever you ask Google, they've probably got a decent answer. And probably if it's a question about knowledge, the decent answer is Wikipedia. And so obviously, I always say, people say, oh, did Wikipedia, is it successful because of Google? I say, well, or Google's successful because of Wikipedia, because we made the internet not suck. And so therefore, you can actually learn things. So clearly there is a symbiotic relationship between us and all the search engines. Like obviously Google's a dominant search engine, but all search engines return Wikipedia very high in the results, because for many things, it's exactly what people are looking for.
Yeah. And there's a related question to that, again from Eike. How is Wikipedia financed? I see often fundraisers, but was the decision against Google AdSense advertising. So while there's this symbiosis of Google, there's also decisions against it.
Sure.
Yeah.
So this was a decision taken very early on. I was always opposed to having ads in Wikipedia. To me, it didn't feel right. It was possible, and in fact, fandom is advertising supported, so there's nothing fundamentally wrong with ad support for different projects. But for Wikipedia, it didn't seem right, and I think it's been really important and really valuable that Wikipedia doesn't have ads, and that Wikipedia is supported by the community. That's done a few things for us that have been very, very healthy. So one of the things is, we are very focused. So the Wikimedia Foundation, which is the charity that runs Wikipedia, is very focused on questions about knowledge equity, making sure that, the vision of Wikipedia is a free encyclopedia for every single person on the planet in their own language. That's really important to us, and it's something that we focus on quite a lot. And if we were ad supported, probably that becomes a secondary goal, right? You suddenly say, do we care about, the next million readers in sub-Saharan Africa? Well, the ad market's terrible there. There's not a lot of money, so we don't care. Whereas in our case, it's like, yeah, of course we care. Like, that's super important to us, because that's what we're all about. The other thing is, when you visit Wikipedia, I think it would be, you would find it quite odd if you went to read about, let's say, Exxon, I don't mean to be picking on Exxon, but Exxon Valdez, that type of controversy, or Tesla. Let's say you went to read about Tesla Motors, and you saw an advert for Tesla, and you might think to yourself, is this really neutral content, or is it paid for by the advertisers? And you suddenly would be under the pressure from the advertisers about the content and things like that. Whereas now, like literally, we don't care what Tesla thinks or Exxon thinks. Like it's not an issue. And so,
but Tesla could donate as a company.
Yeah, they could.
So the donation is the key financial.
Yeah.
Way of,
so the vast majority of the money that runs Wikipedia is the small donors. So we do have, and that's actually that's probably as important as the advertising question, because sometimes people say, oh, why don't you just, like, instead of asking for money on the website, why don't you get Google, Apple, all the tech giants should just chip in and pay for it. And it's like, think that through. Would you really think that's the right answer, right? I don't think it would be the right answer. And I have great friends, and we're friendly with those companies. I'm not saying anything negative against them. I'm just saying, actually, it's a lot better if we're beholden to the general public, not beholden to a handful of tech giants.
Okay. So I would see that this neutrality, which you kept over the 20 years, is really a key of the success also, that you really made the community, created a voice for them, and also they are now contributing not only time but also financial support. Very, very important. I know that we are, LCX is a regulated entity. We are based in Liechtenstein. We had been engaged with the regulators there, but also talking to regulators in other places. Most of them are blockchain critics and skeptics about cryptocurrencies. They want much, much more regulation and want to go in detail, or just try to put a time machine and say Bitcoin didn't exist, but they can't really ignore it. It's too powerful to be ignored. But I know you are a skeptic as well. What is your point of view, and how do you see blockchain and cryptocurrency at the moment, in kind of comparing it to the internet of information at the beginning of the 90s and 2000s and now?
So here's what I would say. So I'm a free market person. I believe in free markets, and that's fantastic. But I also believe in the rule of law. So I think that business and transactions can flourish in a moral and positive way as long as there is the rule of law. And so when we talk about regulation, the problem I have with the word regulation is that can mean a lot of things, right? Regulation can mean the government controls every single thing, or regulation can just mean if somebody rips me off, I actually have a way of getting recourse. And I think that's really, really important. And certainly, sometimes I've seen people, normally younger, more naive people, saying, oh, and merchants are going to love blockchain because there's no Bitcoin, because there's no chargebacks. And it's like, as a business, chargebacks are kind of okay, right? Like, somebody's not happy with your service and there is a procedure that they can get their money back. That's okay. I don't really think people would be happy using their credit cards if they thought the instant I hit send, if anything goes wrong, too bad, I'm a sucker, right? That's not really healthy and happy. And so that rule of law, and so that regulation aspect of things, it's realistically, for a person who is saying, okay, a lot of what's going on in the blockchain space, in the crypto space, there's a lot of dodgy scams, it's a bubble, there's a lot of bad stuff going on. And we all know that's out there. Even if you're an honest sort of booster, you have to say, actually, it's not great, right? Every time somebody, sort of a wallet gets stolen of $18 million, that's not great, or a scammer sets up a thing and collects a bunch of Bitcoin and vanishes, that's bad. And so the idea of what LCX is doing is the only reason I was really sort of interested in getting involved with you guys is when you said, oh no, we're this isn't some random. I mean, I think when we first started talking about it, it was probably just around the time that Mt. Gox sort of blew up and a lot of money was missing and so on. if you had said, "Oh no, I wrote some Perl scripts and I'm going to start an exchange," I would have said, "Dude, like not interested." When you say, "No, actually, we're going through all the right channels to do everything institutionally in a way," I'm like, okay, that's actually interesting. I don't know where we're going to end up in 10 years' time, in this. So, but I'm interested. Obviously, it's too big a phenomenon, and so I can't forecast. I mean, I think we're going to see some bad times, and I think it's unfortunate that I think a lot of people are speculating, and anytime there's a speculative bubble, the same thing happened in the .com era.
Right.
People speculated, and either they, thought they were rich and turned out not to be rich, right? Which isn't the worst tragedy in the world, although it was quite painful for the people involved. Or they were sort of thinking about retirement and saw a way to put more of their money into a handful of risky assets and lost their entire retirement funds. That's going to happen here. Like, people are who shouldn't be putting that much of their money into Bitcoin, or who should be. So, I mean, I think a lot of people, the hodlers, they've done very well. My advice to them is sell some. If you've made a lot of money, sell a taste, right? Get yourself comfortable. You'll still have enough that if it goes to, $1 million, you'll still be very rich. But frankly, like, it's a bubble. Bubbles crash, bubbles collapse. And Bitcoin could fall back to $100. Like, that could happen. Like, how quickly, I don't know. But, like, a lot of bad things can happen. And I know this because in the .com boom and bust, a lot of things blew up, and even great companies who, if you held through at all, you would have made money by now. They collapsed quite a lot, and so I think people need to be very thoughtful about that risk. And it's hard to. It's really sort of psychologically hard if you bought Bitcoin 5 years ago. And you've made a real sort of nice, not even a fortune, but you put in a few $100s, and you're like sitting on, like, this is, for many people, that would be their biggest asset. It's kind of hard to go, I could go back to 100 and I'd be quite sad. It's easier to fantasize about, have fun being poor, everybody. Look at me, I'm so smart. But it's like,
so I think good points on that side. So a lot of people are comparing the whole Bitcoin, blockchain, cryptocurrencies also in terms of the stage to kind of the early days of the internet. We now have roughly 100 million active users or wallets out there, so it's not billions yet. Nevertheless, there's a lot of hype around it already, and especially looking at different tokens or assets, they're like, you're right, there might be hype and they might be going away again. So it feels like in the internet there was CompuServe, then AOL, and then we had Google and Facebook, but before Facebook also there was a MySpace as a social network and these things. So there's an evolution. So I'm a strong believer that these things. That there's an evolution also on blockchain technology, and who knows if Ethereum will be really the leader. There are so many good other projects out there, from Polkadot to Cardano or what else. And so there will be an evolution. But what I truly believe in is that there's this the first wave of the internet, where you drove the development of the internet of information, and now we have the internet of value. And if you listen to what Jack Dorsey is saying, or Elon Musk also, they talk about freeing the internet, and you kind of freed the knowledge and put it into the hands of thousands of people from third world countries to now here the first world. On our side here in London, for example. And then now, if you listen to these thoughts, it's about freeing the monetary system and giving financial services or money in a digital form to everybody on a smartphone. Isn't that exciting?
It is, but I think it's easy to get caught up in the hype. So for example, it's quite common for me. Today I bought my lunch, and I just tapped my smartphone. So I've already got financial products on my phone, but it's just connected to my bank, and that's not that's not an innovation that has anything to do with blockchain whatsoever.
Mm.
And so it's sort of easy to say that, but it's actually, you know, I mean, I said this once to someone on Twitter. It's like, just imagine if you could walk into a shop and just touch a card, and I'm like, that's exactly how I buy groceries all the time. Like, it's not, I don't know where you live, but that's kind of like not an innovation. And so I don't, that doesn't mean there is no innovation here, right?
Yeah.
But the innovations, I think, are far more abstract. They're far more potentially B2B, or, you know, sort of, I mean, I think there's some really interesting, still kind of unknown, because this is where we get into a really complex area of international regulation. But, you know, like the idea of, like, for many countries around the world, mostly poorer ones, right, doing transactions is actually quite difficult with wealthy countries. So, like, if I want to send, you know, money to someone in sub-Saharan Africa, I may find that very, very hard. Like, that's not necessarily something. They are often denied access to PayPal and some of those kinds of things because of their banking system's not ready, and this, that, and the other. So does blockchain allow people in those places? But that doesn't sound like a $1 trillion world-changing market opportunity, but it could be the root of something quite interesting. But that's like one use case where I'm like, yeah, actually, I can see that. Like, people want to transact across borders in a way that's new and different, because it's quite hard to do. But I mean, I think there's a lot of problems that have to be solved. I mean, certainly the you know, the cost of transactions on blockchain is ridiculously high, and varies. And, you know, also, you know, I have a lot of concerns right now. These aren't philosophical concerns about blockchain and cryptocurrencies in general, but current concerns, as many people do, about some of the infrastructure and the organizations that are a big part of the backbone of the infrastructure. And I'm thinking now of, like, Tether, for example. Like, the question of the financial stability of Tether as a stable coin is a huge one, right? If Tether were to collapse tomorrow and the market lost trust, it would have enormous ramifications throughout the entire ecosystem. And they haven't traditionally been particularly transparent about what they're doing. They are sort of one step beyond regulators and one step beyond, let's say, the rule of law. And I think that's problematic. And I think there's a huge risk there, which is why, again, to go back to, you know, the regulatory environment and the rule of law environment, you know, if there were a stable coin, and I do think some of the other stable coins seem a little bit better, but I don't think any of them, well, I'm not an expert, so I'll just say what little I know. I haven't seen a stable coin that I trust as much as I trust Citibank, right? I've been banking with Citibank forever, and I know if I put my $1,000 in Citibank, then I forget about it for 10 years, and I'll go back and I'll have 1,000 plus a little bit of interest, right? It's stable, right? It'll be there. Whereas I feel if I put $1,000 into Tether, I'm not so sure about 10 years from now, right? I don't feel confidence in the organization. I'm not saying, you know, I'm not accusing them of anything. I'm just saying I don't see a framework there that gives rise to the level of trust that makes me feel that this is a stable thing. And so I think that some of those problems, and this is where we get into the question of, if there are use cases that are meaningful, right, then this technology will thrive in the long run. But there can be a lot of bumps along the way if we have organizations that are not, they're playing fast and loose with the rules, and basically people lose money that they shouldn't have lost because somebody was corrupt or careless or whatever. You know, it can be really problematic.
You're totally right. I think that's a key element, that, like, if innovation is happening, the players also have huge responsibility. And now with stablecoins, especially, that the system is the right way. So that's why LCX has now invested several $1 million into the regulatory framework, into security, into the platform as well. And we're taking it sometimes more slowly, because it's also a lot of responsibility, which we are like starting on the platform, like
Yeah, and I mean, I think for
responsibility about the
you,
users. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, for you, it's the classic thing of uh, like, and this is just sort of my advice to you, which is that is exactly the right way to go. Slow, careful, thoughtful. Obviously, the downside risk is, meanwhile, sort of these wild, crazy things are going through the roof, and people are sitting on billions and billions of assets and deposits, and so you may miss the wave, or you may, you see what I'm saying? Like, that's hard. However, I think, just in terms of advising LCX, which normally I wouldn't do publicly, but here we are, is to say, look, you could sort of say, yeah, the regulatory thing sounds great, but let's just go for it, right? And then it's too late. You already didn't win that race, right? Like, Tether is a huge thing, right? They've already won the let's be wild and crazy and just get things done race. And I think the real thing is, it's like, okay, longer term, if we think this is going to be mainstream, maybe Tether will eventually publish a proper audit and everything turns out okay, or maybe not. And in the maybe not case, I do think there'll be a really rough time for this industry, the blockchain industry. But what can come out of those ashes is to say, well, actually, from now on, like, you kind of do want rule of law, right? You want to make sure that there's some oversight, proper audits, so that you can go, actually the money is where it's supposed to be. And I think that's really important.
That's right. So, for example, that's why we don't have Tether on our platform, but we have USDC, the US dollar coin from Circle. And Circle is also engaging closely with the World Economic Forum, so they have a high reputation there as well. That's where we also met, and there's a clear organization behind who takes responsibility.
Yeah.
And now what we are also seeing is that central banks are jumping in and saying, okay, there's this innovation in technology, and we could leverage it to put digital money to the people, and then you still would tap your card to buy something, but the whole transaction there would be fully automated, and it would not be in the silos like it is now. There's a Visa silo, and there's a MasterCard silo, and then there are banking silos. But you would break it up and say the money would be kind of fully decentralized. I think that's where innovation there's no way to stop it. This is coming. It's just a matter of when and how and who will be the players doing it. Will it be community driven? And that I would love to see, like, Internet of Value kind of Wikipedia project who really takes that same approach of credibility, like also saying no to a lot of good deals you probably had on the table. And I think that's gives a big applause from my side to you and to the whole Wikimedia Foundation team who did that. Now, I wanted to spend also a little bit of time on your other aspects. When I look at your title, founder of Wikipedia, but also founder of Fandom and Wiki Tribune Social, can you quickly explain first what is Fandom?
Sure.
And how did it come together? What's the status of Fandom?
Yeah, so Fandom used to be called Wikia. So this is advertising-supported wiki communities. The reason we rebranded to Fandom is it turns out that the vast majority of the communities are fan communities. So, the great sort of older wikis we have are like Wikipedia, of course, is like the name is a parody of Wikipedia, but it's about Star Wars. There's huge communities for Grand Theft Auto, Game of Thrones, House of Cards, all Fortnite, like big fandom communities about all kinds of things, obscure, mainstream, and all of that. That company has done incredibly well during lockdown because, what have we all done all around the world? We sat at home and watched Netflix, and people wanted to look things up. And so we've had a very successful kind of time of it. We also own something called D&D Beyond, which is Dungeons and Dragons Beyond. So it's a suite of online tools for playing Dungeons and Dragons. That's also been incredible and boomed during lockdown. Just really that sort of fan community is huge, and we provide tools for them. So that's done very well. WT Social is my attempt to, it's a pilot project. It's to rethink social networking, to really think about what can you do that's more collaborative, more open, more community driven. So rather than having this issue where the company has to police the content, how do we bring in the idea of the community being able to police itself? So if somebody posts disinformation, the other community members, the trusted community members, have the authority to just get rid of it and deal with it. So that's one project. And then within that company, the other thing that I've been doing is I'm sort of interested in video. I'm interested in what we're doing here. So we've created a product called quiznightbeyond.com, which we're launching soon with Fandom as a partner. And you can go on www.quiznightbeyond.com now and like put your email address in, and we'll send out an email when we're ready. But the idea is to play quizzes online. So it's just something that I've done with my family. You just go on and you play quizzes, and it's fun. It's just like a fun, silly side project, but I think it can be very popular. So the thing about me is I always say I'm an entrepreneur, and that's fundamentally what I am. And so I don't self-identify. I mean, yes, founder of Wikipedia and all that, but like that's not the whole of me. It's like I like to get up every day and think, oh, what's something interesting I can work on? What's fun? So this is my fun project, which I think can be very successful and financially successful, and will help fund the WT Social kind of experimentation.
Okay, yeah. So I think entrepreneurs has it in their genes and their DNA to kind of solve problems, and you solve the problem here of boredom with your
well, I mean,
with the family starting the quizzes.
Yeah, I mean, basically we started doing quizzes during lockdown with my mom and my brothers and sisters and so forth, and we live all over the world, and we were doing it on Zoom, and Zoom is great, but it's just like a boring sort of business conferencing tool. And I thought, wouldn't it be more fun if you could actually click and there's sound effects and like fun things happen and ooh, you won and that sort of thing. So just basically created that from scratch, and yeah, it's fun.
But like also when you said you renamed Wikia to Fandom because of there's this fan culture, I can also tell you that with blockchain project as a whole, but also in particular with LCX, there's also a fan culture. So we have a merchandise store with T-shirts and polos. People are buying it, and they're holders of our utility token, and they become fans. They are passionate about our success, and they also help us a lot. So this community-driven approach, that's, I think, for me as an entrepreneur, as I started many businesses from like the late 90s to now, I've never seen that. You had clients, you had users, but now like with blockchain and cryptocurrencies, you turn the audience and your clients into your big family. So and our it's a LCX family, and that's very exciting also to see.
Great. Yeah.
So as we round this up, Jimmy, I always ask my guests, what are the key 3 trends you see in the industry, and how does it apply to what you do now?
Yeah. Okay. So I think one is, although it's going to pull back a little bit because we are going to come out of lockdown and we're going to want to see each other in person again. But I think the rise of exactly what we're doing, video conversations, people have gotten used to it. You do it with your friends, your family, which you never did before. I never had a Zoom call with my mother, and now we do it every week. So even if that diminishes, I think that this is here to stay. Like the video aspect of things is something that, frankly, I remember when I was a kid, probably about 10 years old, the phone company like AT&T came out to our school to talk about the future of technology, and they showed us a little film, and in the film, people pushed a button, and on the screen they talked through the screen, and we're like, oh, that's cool, like you could talk. And then for a long time that like never happened, and now it's like happened. Like, oh wow, it's like we're living in the future. And to us, it's just like, oh god, I have to go on Zoom again. But We are living in the future. So I think that video element of things is huge. I think the mobile revolution is becoming mature, but I think there's still a lot of room to run there. I think that there's a lot of mobile apps that in 5 years we're going to say, oh, that was obvious. Why didn't we have that already? Because we've got the penetration and the usage levels now. And then finally, I think the global aspect of things, and this ties back into mobile, for example. I was just talking about this one earlier today, which is when Instagram got bought by Facebook, and I don't remember all the numbers exactly, but it got bought for like $1 billion, and it was a team of something like 12 people. There are right now, there are amazing teams in Nigeria, right? A team of 12 people in Nigeria could create an app that becomes popular and goes big and could be a unicorn, right? Because it's possible now. And there's no monopoly in Silicon Valley on clever people, smart people, and so on and so forth. And so I think we're going to start to see some real tech innovations coming out of places like that traditionally haven't been big. They can make global products, or interestingly, they can make products that Mark Zuckerberg would have never thought of because his life is so different from their lives. And so I think that there's all kinds of interesting things. So the global piece, the growth of mobile, and video, those are my three trends.
Yeah, excellent point. It is, I think, especially this decentralization from innovation, that it's not everything needs to be happening in Silicon Valley, is so true now. And we do see that with blockchain project as well.
I mean, look, people can work together remote. Like remote working has always been kind of a dream of the internet, but we never quite got there. Now, by sort of unfortunate circumstances, all kinds of companies have been forced to go through that transition and learn how to do it. And some of them are finding, no, actually, we need to go back to the office. But a lot of them are finding, hey, you know what? This actually works. Like, we're going to continue this, or we're going to meet 2 days a week, or we're going to, like, it's a lot of change has happened, and we don't know how much of it's going to stick, but it's really interesting.
That's right. And I think the change will continue as we go along with the formation from the Internet of Information to Internet of Value. And it was an exciting discussion here this evening. Thank you so much for taking the time with me and the community here. Lots of greetings to London. And thank you very much.
Hopefully I'll see you in person sometime soon in Davos.
Great. Jimmy, talk soon. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thanks.
This is LCX Insights Live. For more insights, please visit lcx.com/insights and follow us on Twitter @LCX. Onwards and